Dr. Adrian Cole had moved to Pine Lake for peace and solitude, but what he found instead was a war that crept into his quiet sanctuary and tested everything he thought he knew about patience, resilience, and justice. The battle began quietly, with whispers of control and manipulation within the community's HOA led by Victoria Hale, a woman whose hunger for power went far beyond enforcing rules about lawns or docks. Her empire was built on intimidation, retaliation, and a carefully cultivated illusion of authority. It started when Adrian refused to stay silent about her overreach, when he exposed her fraudulent initiatives and manipulative practices, and from that moment forward, she had marked him as an enemy, escalating her tactics step by step, until it felt less like a neighborhood dispute and more like a cold, calculated war for survival. The tension erupted one morning at 9 Ruse, when a county inspector named Mr. Henderson, one of Victoria's loyal enforcers, appeared at Adrian's cabin with his clipboard and smug demeanor, declaring his home unsafe because of a dock bolt that was supposedly loose by a 1/16 of an inch, even though Adrian himself had built the dock with his brother Michael Cole and knew every bolt was tight and secure. And when Henderson slapped a red tag on the cabin labeling it unsafe for habitation, it was clear the attack was deliberate retaliation designed to drive him out of his own home. Standing beside him, his loyal neighbor Michael offered support with a mug of coffee and a dry comment about reinforcements. But the weight of the red tag hit Adrian hard. It was not just an inconvenience, it was an assault on the one place that represented peace. And in that moment, the quiet doctor who preferred healing over fighting felt a cold, rare anger rising, knowing this was no longer about small disputes, but about survival. When Henderson left, Adrian immediately called Deputy Martinez, the one person in law enforcement who saw through Victoria's schemes, and she confirmed that Henderson was one of Victoria's preferred vendors, a man with a history of extorting homeowners for repairs that weren't needed. Together, Adrian and Martinez realized that this wasn't just harassment, it was escalation, an attempt to remove him before he could help build a real case against her. But instead of backing down, Adrian proposed a trap. Victoria had used fake detectives to spy on him, so they would use a real one against her. He would stage a very public purchase of an expensive smart home security system, knowing Victoria's crew would not be able to resist breaking in to replace it with one of their bugs. And that was when Martinez and her team would catch them in the act. The theater was convincing. Adrian bought the most expensive kit in town, asked questions loudly so gossip would spread, and let Michael accidentally leak to the neighborhood's biggest talker that he was installing a cloud recording camera system to document everything, and sure enough, word spread to Victoria within hours. Meanwhile, Martinez and her team, under a judge's warrant, installed a decoy detector in Adrian's hallway, one that looked perfectly ordinary, but inside housed a high-resolution night vision camera and sensitive audio gear linked to a surveillance van down the road. Adrian himself could not stay in the house due to the red tag, so he moved in with Michael temporarily, waiting in tense silence for days until finally, on the third night, a dark sedan with headlights off pulled into his driveway, and 2 black-clad professionals slipped inside with efficiency and precision, voices hushed as they confirmed their orders to sweep for signals, disable his new system, and swap the detector with their own bug. Listening through his earpiece, Adrian's pulse raced as he heard them twisting the decoy from its base, but that was the signal Martinez had been waiting for. At her word, the floodlights blazed, sheriff's cruisers screeched into the driveway, and officers stormed the property, catching both intruders before they could escape. One even tried to break a window to flee, only to be met by deputies waiting out back. Within minutes, both men were in handcuffs, and when one of them, realizing the game was over, looked at Martinez and said he wanted to make a deal, the name he gave was the one everyone expected: Victoria Hale. The arrests shook the community, stripping away the illusion of fear Victoria had cultivated, and for the first time, neighbors who had stayed silent began to speak openly, no longer afraid. But Adrian thought it was over too soon, because that evening Victoria herself appeared on her dock with a briefcase, heels slipping dangerously on the wet wood as she tried to flee on her speedboat. And in her panic, she fell, crashing into the cold lake water with a sickening crack to her arm and a head wound. And in that moment, Adrian's training took over, not as her enemy but as a doctor sworn to save lives. He sprinted, dove in, and dragged her shivering body to safety, stabilizing her airway and circulation, wrapping her in his jacket, applying pressure to her bleeding head wound, and reassuring her with calm steadiness even as she shivered and muttered half-conscious confessions, whispering that she had signed the checks, hired the crews, ordered the bugs and red tags, all just business to protect property values. Martinez arrived with her body camera recording, and every incriminating word Victoria whispered in shock was preserved, her own voice sealing her fate while Adrian kept her alive. Weeks later, the final HOA meeting was not in the small hall, but in the high school auditorium, packed with neighbors hungry for truth. And this time the energy was not fear but relief, purpose, and justice, as Martinez methodically presented the evidence. The van with master keys and bugs, the forged work orders, the burglars' testimonies, the financial trail through shell corporations, and finally, the devastating footage of Victoria's own confession on the dock while Adrian treated her injuries. When the lights came up, Martinez announced the charges: conspiracy, fraud, burglary, wiretapping, and revealed Henderson had also been arrested and was cooperating. The community erupted in applause, not for vengeance but for freedom from fear. And for Adrian, sitting quietly in the back, it was not triumph but closure, an answer to the question of how far a man would go to defend his own. He had not thrown punches or sought revenge. He had used patience, planning, observation, and healing, fighting with precision instead of rage, and in the end, truth had won. Life at Pine Lake slowly returned to peace, the HOA restructured under Michael's reluctant leadership, rules simplified, budgets transparent, auditors mapping the financial web Victoria had woven, and even class action suits forming to help families who had been wronged. Victoria herself pled guilty with evidence stacked against her, sentenced to a low-security federal prison, her name rarely spoken anymore like a storm that had passed, while Adrian found himself back on his repaired dock with his brother Michael Cole, fishing rods in hand, joking about the "don't mess with my quiet" button and reflecting on how he had always thought he'd be the man to just move away, but now understood there was a line between avoiding conflict and letting someone steal your peace. For Adrian, the fight had never been about dominance or punishment. It was about protecting the quiet corner of the world he loved, and now that quiet was back, earned through endurance and truth, as he sipped coffee on his porch, watching the mist lift off Pine Lake, neighbors waving, board books open, dock bolts tight, water calm, and for the first time in a long time, everything finally right.